Welcome back to another session on the ES6 fundamentals in JavaScript. My name is Chris and today we'll be looking into arrow functions. So this tutorial is part of a series of tutorials all around ES6 and the improvements that happened. I'm compiling a playlist and I will add with every week the new videos there. So go check them out if you're interested in the other features. And let's get right into the topic now. So I've prepared a small example to look into the arrow functions. This is here a simple function that is doing just an addition, a plus b in the end, and will return the results. There's a console log. Every time when I save the code, it will automatically run and do the output. So if I save it now, I'll get 11, so 5 plus 6 returns 11, quite simple. And this is how we used to write functions before ES6. Let me go through the other examples as well. So we just look at the syntax, how it used to be. Here's another function, get odd numbers. It takes a list, so we'll need the list here in the top that I prepared. It's just a random list of numbers. There are some odd numbers, some even numbers. And what we want to do here is filter out all the even numbers so we get a list of odd numbers in the end. And this function takes just a list and it returns a filtered list. If you don't know how array filters work, there will be a video on that in the short future, so make sure to come back and check it out. But just to simplify it for now, an array filter is nothing else than just having a Boolean condition there, and everything that doesn't fit this condition will be sorted out. So in this case, if you look at it, it just takes a function as a parameter. So the list filter function takes a function again, which will be every single item that comes from the list. So first it will be 1, then 3, then 7, then 8, and so on and so on. And every time we get the chance to validate here, right? So we take the number modulo 2, so division by 2, and see if there is a rest. If there is no rest, so it's divisible by 2, it will be, the output will be 0, so it will be an even number. But we want the odd number, so we're looking for all the results that will return 1. So for example, 7 divided by 2 will be 3 times, and there is 1 as a result, which is bigger than 0, and that's why 7 will return as an odd number. So if I run this code now, you will see that I get 1, 3, 7, 17, 23, and 99. And all the other numbers, the even numbers, were sorted out. So 148, yeah, and 12. Okay, let's check out the last example that I have here. This is a function that returns an object. I came up with this. Doesn't make much sense, but it's only about the idea of returning an object. So as you can see, this calculator, now I have the typo there, so calculator a and b as parameters. So what we do is we return an object and do an addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and print it out. So with 10 and 2, we should, calculator, we should be able to see the results here. So 10 plus 2 is 12, 10 minus 2 is 8, and so on and so on. So quite simple. All right, good. So let's look into ES6, how we can apply arrow functions. The big benefit with arrow functions is that the syntax is shorter and makes your work more efficient. But how do they look exactly? Let me print out a separator here so it doesn't disturb us. Okay. And let's start converting each function one by one. Good. Let's take the first one, the add function. We have add a and b here. We want the new output to be d so we can recognize the output. If I save it, obviously I get an error because the add identifier was already defined before. So the best thing what we can do is we'll put the whole thing into a separate scope. We do it by use of the curly braces or brackets, whatever you want to call them. And this way we shouldn't interfere anymore with the other output. All right, so we have 11 here. How do we make it shorter? So the first thing that you do is you get rid of the function keyword. We don't need it anymore, so we can define it as a const, and we provide here the parameters again, and we use this typical arrow, so equals and bigger than sign, which creates the arrow, and this is an arrow function already. So if I run the code again, I get 11, everything works fine. Good. You can make this even shorter. The benefit with arrow functions is that if you have just something to return and there's no other commands there, you can even skip the curly brackets. Let me show you how this looks like. So let me copy this. Obviously this will not work if I try to run it, because we have again the same name here. To make it simple, let me just put this again in curly brackets. So we have our own scope. And yeah, what we can do here is, because we have just the return here, we can get rid of the return. We can get rid of the curly brackets here and just save it, and that's it. Let's just add another output here, so E is 11, and you see there is a huge difference to what you had before. So you had the function add A and B plus the curly brackets and the return, and here basically you just have a one-liner. In the beginning it takes a bit time to get used to it, but once you get the hang of it, it's super useful, super readable, trust me. Good. Let's check out the next example. We have here the odd numbers filter. So let's take this again and let's create our new scope here and have a new letter here. Okay, so F is the output. Let's get started shortening it. So again, we get rid of the function keyword. We can replace it with a const. The list stays as an input and we turn it into an arrow function. And if you noticed here as well, there is a function here. And this is an anonymous function, it doesn't have a name. And we can apply the same logic here. So we just get rid of the function keyword and we turn it into an arrow function. Now if I save this, we get the output. F, the odd numbers are here. Everything is working fine. Okay. Now we can even improve that, because if you remember, if the return type is the only command that we have, and this is the case here, we can make it even shorter. So let's copy this and let's give it a new letter, EFG, and basically we can get rid of this and the last bracket. If I save it, again the output is working fine. And I think you noticed that we can even improve on that again, because we have another return here. So let's copy this too. All right, MGH, and let's get rid of this return, the brackets again, and suddenly we have a one-liner here. The output is still the same, but you see we turned this whole thing here, those 5 lines of code, returned into just one line of code. Now you have to be careful here, because at some point readability will be a problem. So there is something that you can do, obviously. So let's improve this as well. All right. What we can do is we can just use this and create our own function. So let's call it isOdd, and this will be our function that will just take a number and try to figure out if it's an even or odd number. If it's an odd number, it will return true. And this is the only thing that the filter here requires. So I can provide here is odd. There's no parameters necessary because filter will provide already the number parameter as first thing to is odd. So if I save this, we still get the same output. And we increased our readability because we know there's an is odd function and we know what it does. And we have the get odd numbers function that is a bit more simplified now. And you see that you can save a lot of time with arrow functions and simplify your code. It will be especially interesting for you later on when you start moving on to array functions. There's a lot of things that you can do with arrays. You can filter them, you can reduce them, you can sort them, and so on and so on. And those are operations that are happening very, very often. And there will be a separate video on that, so stay tuned for this. Yeah, so let's get to the last example that I have here. It's the object return. Good, so let's create another scope here. Oops, there we go. J is the output. We have the output here still, everything is working fine. Let's convert it into an arrow function. So const again, we got rid of the function keyword, equals A and B, we turn it into an arrow function. All is good. Now, as you can see, we just have a return and we would like to simplify it as well here. So if I get rid of the curly brackets here and the return, well, it's not that simple. It doesn't work. If I save it, I get an error because JavaScript expects that this curly bracket is the beginning of the function body, obviously, right? Because this is normally how it works. So this is the block scope here. Now, to overcome this, there's a simple trick. You just have to put it into a round bracket. And suddenly it works. So whenever you have an object you want to return directly in an arrow function, don't forget the round brackets, and this should fix it. Good. There are two more things that I want to add to the arrow functions. The first thing is that they have to be defined before they can be used. It doesn't work like it used to with the function keyword. So you could define your function at the end of your file, but use it before. So it has to be already defined, which is generally a good practice. And the other thing about arrow functions is this keyword. So arrow functions don't create their own this context like regular functions did before. They reuse the very same context in which they were defined. So you might know this sort of syntax. There was something like a function doing some job, and often people would define something like self equals this, which would be a reference to the this context, and later on, if they have another function that they want to call, they will be able to reference that context, in this case this context of this function. But in case of an arrow function, this doesn't work like that anymore. You don't have to store away the reference of the outer this context, because the function, if it's defined here, will just reuse the very same this context. Okay, I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed the video, I would really love a like and subscribe, and make sure to come back again for the next session. The code from this example here I will put again on GitHub, so you can check it out, play around with it, and find out for yourself how the arrow functions work. The link will be in the description. And yeah, I think that covers it all. I hope to see you in the next video, and as always, I wish you bug-free code.